Folks, it's been a tragic week for our country. With everything that happened down in Texas this week, with the loss of such innocent lives, it's been tragic to sit back and see this all unfold. On this edition of the podcast, I have on Justin Francom again, and he was scheduled to come on again to talk about health and fitness, because I think it's a huge, important subject. But as the events of this week unfolded, Justin actually called me and said, I don't feel right talking about this right now. And I said, I don't either. I was like, do you want to just cancel? And he had an interesting idea of talking about where we are as a country and as a people right now. And this conversation was very much off the cuff. There wasn't necessarily a predefined subject. And we just let the conversation carry us where it did. But I think it's one of those vital, important conversations, and I'm so glad I get to share that with you. And that's next on this edition of the Mormon Renegade Podcast.
You're listening to the Mormon Renegade Podcast.
Welcome back to the Mormon Renegade Podcast. As always, you can get a hold of me either by email at mormonrenegade@gmail.com. You can also get a hold of me on Instagram and Twitter and Getter under the handle Mormon Renegade. Also, we have a website up, and that's mormonrenegade.com, so go check that out. So, Justin, I know when we first talked last week, and I was going to have you back on, we were going to talk about health and fitness, which is something that's near and dear to my heart, especially since I'm working so hard to get back into shape. But with everything that's gone on this week, not to mention in just the last month, everything that's happened and everything that I think that is about to happen. I know at my place of business, we're strategizing now to weather a storm, so to speak, right? I was in meetings all day today, and it was brace for impact because we know things are getting bad. We can't get concrete for our projects. Gas is expensive. And that's on top of just the horrendous tragedy that happened out in Texas yesterday. So when you called me and you said, David, I want to talk about something else, I was so thankful. And it just bore testimony to me that the Spirit's at work with God's people. Because it was going to feel pretty disingenuous just talking about just that without at least mentioning what's going on. So when you called, it was just a testimony builder to me that the Spirit is working with folks, you more than me, because you initiated the call, but he's working with his people as much as he can, as much as we will allow, so that we can address these things. And so this episode, for everybody listening, this is a last minute thing. And Justin and I are very much going by the Spirit on this. At the same time, I'm going to say this. I feel like we're going to talk about some pretty heavy stuff tonight. And I think we're going to do it in a way that is going to hopefully enlighten a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm grateful that you were willing to switch topics here too, because I mean, health and fitness is very near and dear to my heart, and it's something that I think can benefit a lot of people. But there's bigger concerns right now in the world. There's things going on that we can't just ignore, and especially as members of the restoration, as participants and brethren here, and we can't just ignore what's happening in the world and just kind of hide in our own little, in our own little shell and just hope to just wait for things to bypass.
I think you're right. And I think, look, and I'm super guilty of this, right? Because I was I was an undercover fundamentalist for probably, you know, a decade, realistically a decade, right? Where I tried to shove all this stuff back in a box, stuff meaning early restoration teachings, and I tried to stuff it back in a box. And I thought, okay, if I can just stuff this in a box, I can, just lay low and go to the LDS church and get by with that. But I think now we're at a time where we as fundamentalists, or those who have fundamentalist leanings, whether in or out of the LDS church, independent or with a group, the world is darkening. And as fundamentalists, we may be in a very unique position to allow the gospel kind of unadulterated to shine through us if we're correct, if we're courageous enough to take that step.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's the city on a hill, and this idea, I mean, those who have been warned, it's upon us to warn our brethren. And we have more than, I mean, it doesn't, you don't need a weatherman to know which way the wind blows right now.
Right.
But we've got extra insight. We've been given gifts and prophecies and things that give us a potential leg up. But I think that means we have an extra responsibility. And we have a greater burden upon ourselves to be helping and preparing and see. I mean, one of the things though. Okay, so this is I've been involved in political activism for a long time, and a lot of it is infuriating. Working as a conservative, because the mainstream conservative movement in America, especially in Utah, especially the Republican Party, is not actually conservative.
No, you look, let's be honest. You can't look at Mitt Romney and go, "Ooh, he reminds me of Reagan," right? I mean, yeah. No, it's not there.
So I always had this idea that, man, if we could just wake people up, and it was like it's an information war. We've got to get that information out there, and if that information got out there, we'd be able to clear the air, and people would then make the right decisions, and everything would be fixed. And now it's kind of crazy because it's all out in the open. The information war is over. We are now entering what I believe is a spiritual warfare. This is a time of literal spiritual warfare, and if we aren't prepared, we're not going to weather it. But we've got a bigger burden than just weathering this times. We have to find a way to be that light on a hill. Or we will be a salt that has lost its savor.
I agree with you 100%. And I understand where the inclination is to just kind of hunker down, right? Because let's face it, you and I, we had the benefit. In some ways it's a benefit. In other ways it's something we struggle against. But we live in a time now, and we grew up in a time where, quote, alternative lifestyles were kind of coming forward more, right? For a lot of folks who maybe grew up in fundamentalism, it was a different world, right? I mean, some of the old timers, in the sense of you'd better hide, because Short Creek, that raid on Short Creek, that's front and center in their minds still, and rightfully so. I get it, right? I'll never blame anybody for wanting to hunker down after that atrocity. So I get it, but I think now, I don't know, I just got a real big sense that if you have light, you got to let it shine now, because we need it more than ever.
Yeah.
I want to start. Oh, sorry. Just go ahead.
Oh, well, and it's not the same thing, but I mean, like, I was homeschooled back before it was really acceptable, and my family had to flee when the neighbor started calling CPS on us for homeschooling. Yeah. And we didn't go to church.
Right.
And so, so I understand that everybody's got this natural inclination to prepare and to preserve themselves, and take care of themselves first. And I understand that. I relate that. I don't think that's wrong. That's a natural inclination. Sure. And it's just like the airplane, the oxygen masks fall down, put it on yourself first so you can put it on somebody else. But I'm afraid that we can't just stop there at putting it on ourselves. And a lot of the prepping movement, and the hardcore, ultra conservative movement is very much selfish, in my opinion. It's very much focused on just making sure that me and my own are prepared, and that they're going to be taken care of. And I think that to a certain degree that might even be a complete misconception. Well, I don't know. Are you very familiar with eschatologies?
A little bit, not much. I've dabbled a little bit.
Okay. Wait.
Why don't you just explain it for those who may not know what it is?
All right. So there's different worldviews on how the world is going to end, and that's not eschatology. That's eschatology is your source of knowledge. What is that? This is a theological term. I can't remember it, but basically within Christianity, there's three worldviews. There's premillennialism, postmillennialism, and amillennialism. And the premillennialism is this idea that there's going to be this period of great upheaval and turmoil leading up to Christ's return, and then Christ returns to save the world that would have otherwise just been completely eradicated. It's the Left Behind.
Okay.
Type of a maybe I do have that right. Eschatology. No, I don't. I could Google it, but that's all right. Let me just keep going with this. The other view is the amillennialism, which is that nothing changes. The sheep and the goats live happily together until suddenly just one day Christ says, "Hey, I'm coming back. I'm back. All right, goats here, sheep there." And the postmillennialism is this idea that with Christ's resurrection, the church being established through Christ, that we will progress and progress and progress until this point where the gospel is taken to all of the world, the entire world is kind of converted, and then Christ can come and claim the earth. And I think Mormon theology has a very unique take on this, because to a certain degree we're very much premillennialists. We definitely believe that there's going to be this trial and turmoil and hard times coming before Christ comes back. In fact, some of the stuff with Malachi's prophecy, this idea that the whole earth would be wasted at his coming otherwise, if we don't turn the hearts of the children to the hearts of the fathers, and vice versa. The whole earth would be wasted at his coming. Why would it be wasted? Well, because there's nobody worthy enough to be in his presence. So when he comes, just fire, everything burns. So what the restoration is that it's very much premillennialism, but it's also postmillennialism, because the restoration provides the seeds of a progression. And we've been blessed with the fullness of the gospel that can lead us from a scattered fallen man to a converted repentant Christian to a perfected in charity Zion society. And so we believe that Zion will rise from below as it descends from above. The city of Enoch is going to return, and with the city of Enoch returning, we're going to see the Zion established on earth prior to Christ's coming. So it's a combination of both. The world goes to pot for the most part, right? But a Zion is established, and that those who aren't willing to take up swords against their brothers, those who aren't willing to just be involved in the debauchery that's happening in the world before Christ returns, is going to have to flee to Zion as a refuge. So we have both. We have the knowledge that that things are going to get bad. Things are bad, and they're going to get worse. But we also know that as people, we need to become better and better and better. And I think what we're here on is the brink, the very brink of people needing to decide really whose side they're going to be on. And the funny thing is, I don't believe that Zion is established for the church. It's not about us. It's about the tribes of Israel, and it's about those who are willing to come unto Christ and be a part of that. And that is the people who don't know any better, but are good people with good families that would otherwise, if they'd had the truth, would accept it. And so I think there's a lot of service coming up ahead, and we need to be prepared to provide that kind of a service, right? That's what that city on a hill is all about. That's what Salt That Hasn't Lost Its Savor is doing. It's providing that for the rest of the world.
No, I couldn't agree with you more. And the this idea that Zion is just going to be a place where you gather and then you just kind of wait it out, right? I don't think that holds a lot of water, right? Because one of the prophecies, and I believe it was Isaiah, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not a scriptorian, was all nations will flow unto it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that means it's got to be prominent. It's got to be front and center, and it has to be the alternative to what else is happening.
Yeah, a place of miracles, a place of refuge. And the thing is, if it's just getting by, honestly, we're coming towards bad times. I think honestly, to a certain degree, and might be a little controversial, but in some ways, it will be easier to perish.
Oh, I think you're right.
That's the easy route out. Not perishing means you're sticking around for a reason, either to be a part of that church of the devil, or it's because you're going to be serving and you're going to be laboring, and a laborer in Zion.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. And how could it be anything but that, right? When a man gets the priesthood, he doesn't get it for himself, right? Don't get me wrong. There's blessings in holding the priesthood, but we get the priesthood to bless other people.
Of course.
And to think that if the priesthood is what governs Zion, then why wouldn't it be a city of service, right? A place to throw open to the righteous, to come in, to seek shelter, to seek safety. And I think you're right, because we are seeing events dark in nature happening with more frequency, right? I go back to that parable that Christ gave about the woman who's about to give birth, right? The woman in travail. Well, if you think anyone who's seen the process of labor, at first, and I'm sorry, sisters, I know I have no right to really talk on this. I'm just telling you what my experience was when I saw my wife in labor with my kids. At first, those contractions, while they get your attention, they're spread out, right? They're far apart. And as time gets closer, the birth pangs become, more painful, and they come with greater frequency.
That's amazing. You're right. It's the cycles.
And I think what we're seeing now is we are getting close to the event, right?
Yeah, because there's almost no reprieve, right? So here's the thing. Okay, I got a list here. You mind if I just kind of go through a few topics? Just because I wanted to refresh myself. Just where are we, right? What's going on in the world right now?
Can before we do that, do you mind if we talk just a little bit about what transpired in Texas?
Oh yes, absolutely. Yeah, that's on the list. But yeah, let's talk about that too.
I want to talk about that because that's what's on my heart, and I feel like I need to be a little authentic to that. How I knew yesterday that we had reached a point, a mile marker, if you will, down this road, was as I listened to the talking heads on television on both sides, right? I definitely favor one over the other, but as I'm listening to it, nobody gets it, right? Nobody is really understanding what is happening here. They say, what do we do to fix this? You got the leftists who say, well, we just need to come for everybody's guns, right? Well, I'm not on that train. The other one is, well, we got to harden the schools. I get that, right? That's a good Band-Aid, right? Harden those targets, make it tougher to get in. I get that. That makes sense. But no one addresses the problem of we are rotting from the inside. The soul of our country is in tatters.
Well, see, that's the thing. We all, with this, there's so many of these school shootings these days, but with this one, I was just like, I felt done. I felt so sick, and I'm just like,
I was right there.
I understand the liberal argument of, you know what, let's just take all the guns away, from an attitude of just like, I'm tired of this, I'm sick and tired of this kind of thing happening. This shouldn't be going on. We have to do something about it. But the thing is, both these arguments are coming from the same direction. It's, we're going to use government to solve this. Either we're going to use government and police to take away and disarm everybody so nobody can do bad things, or we're going to use government and police to harden the schools and turn them into little prisons and control everybody. And these are both coming from the same direction. And it's like, think, what would Christ do in this situation? How would Christ solve this type of a problem?
He would look at him and be like, you're sick in your spirit. And I know that's a bold thing to say, because I never try to speak for the Savior, but
it's that boy, right? He would have gone to the boy,
right?
The boy who did this, this terrible thing. And everybody's so angry at him. I feel, honestly, and this might be controversial, but I feel compassion. I feel what on earth was he going through to lead him to do that? I remember being 18. I can't imagine what kind of hell he must have gone through to lead him to that.
Dude, I can't either. Right. And I'm with you, Justin, 100%. As I think about those kids who lost their life and the darkness that must have been within that young man, the sense of hopelessness that must have been there. And I think about it. Was there no one in that kid's life that put their arms around him and said, you're worth something? Was there no one that tried to get through to him to say, you don't have to go down this dark path? And this rot that we have within a lot of our youth it's frightening.
And here's the thing too, that just to bring a point to that, exactly, this isn't a problem that a government can solve, because what was missing was somebody in that boy's life who could have led him to the light and out of whatever darkness he was in. That's something that I could have done if I was in his neighborhood, if I knew who he was. That's something that is, this is something that we can all take upon ourselves. We don't just, I'm voting for this person to take the guns away to solve it. I'm voting for that person to turn schools into prisons to solve it. We don't need to go either of those directions, because those are both abdicating responsibility from ourselves. We're not taking personal responsibility here. Nobody is. And that's what needs to happen, because we are all personally, collectively responsible. If this didn't happen in our neighborhoods, it could next time. Is there somebody in our neighborhood? Is there some fatherless boy that that has nobody in his life that he can turn to, nobody who can help him, going through bullying and this struggle, and the schools didn't help him, the parents, the grandparents, whatever. This is something that one good person in the right place at the right time could have prevented, and that's the real solution. But that's taking responsibility on ourselves, and a lot of people don't want to do that. They'd rather, well, we're just going to push this problem off on some kind of other power. Somebody else save us. We don't want to be saviors. We don't want to fall after Christ. We want to have somebody else go and take care of these problems.
No, I think you're 100% correct. And I think as priesthood holders, we have an innate responsibility to seek those out, because that's what Christ did. He wasn't content to just hang with his apostles. That would have been super easy, right?
Yeah.
He's going to those who need him most. And it's been my experience, and it's my testimony, that hasn't stopped. Christ still reaches out. But sometimes people are to a point where they need somebody else to step in, to guide, to point them to the Savior. And until that happens, we're going to keep having this again. Call me naive, but I honestly thought at the beginning of the president's speech last night, he was going to go down a road of, there's something wrong within us. I was like, oh, here it comes. He's going to surprise me. And I would love to be surprised at this point, Justin. I really would, but it didn't. right? And so
Yeah.
I think it's up to every one of us to step forward now. Now is our time to step up, step forward, and say the problem isn't guns. The problem isn't a lack of guns. The problem isn't that our schools aren't fortified like prisons. The problem is that there's a God-shaped hole in our children, and they're trying to fill it with social media. I see it with my kids. I'm not here pretending like my kids haven't experienced that. I've made mistakes as a dad, right? If I could do it all over again, I wouldn't give them a cell phone until they could vote, right?
Yeah.
because it's, but I did the best I could, thinking, okay, they're going to have to learn to navigate these waters at some point, but I made a mistake. If I could go back and do it all over again, I wouldn't have. Having said that, there's still time to remedy those situations. But we have to start now, because there is a God-shaped hole in our kids. And the adversary's been really cunning in being able to use that to his advantage. I mean, when you and I had a bad day, look, I'm 44 years old. I don't know how old you are, but when I had a bad day at school, I could go home and forget about it. Now it goes with them.
Well, I was homeschooled, but
yeah,
you're right. Though. You know,
social media goes home with them, and we have got to get to a point to where we fill that God-shaped hole that's right in the middle of our kids with God, and not with the latest gadget.
And it's not just our kids either. Really, it's a God-shaped hole in our country, and this is why the regular approaches to solving problems these days aren't going to work. You know, in the past, back in the 90s, I remember the 90s. Back in the 90s,
those were the days.
Yeah, when we didn't really have any problems. If there were problems, I mean, it was so much. There were lots of remedies. There were lots of solutions. There were lots of institutions that we could rely upon to utilize to solve problems. But these days, we've lost all of our institutions. There's really nothing left.
And the ones that are around, we don't trust.
Well, yeah, that's what I mean. That's why they're not there anymore. They're not functioning. They've been co-opted. They've been taking control. They're not doing their jobs. And I mean, outside of even the family, I mean, individual families, sure, but as a whole in this country, families, that's a failed institution as well. People don't talk about husbands and wives. They talk about their partners.
Yeah.
And it's not just from political correctness. People aren't even bothering getting married because they know it's not going to last. They're not creating stable homes. And that's the kind of, I mean, even besides all the other problems, I'm sure in this particular case that influenced it, just that alone, that's a problem. And it's really this, it's a spiritual warfare. These are dark forces at work. And if we just think that, it's just a bad politician with an incorrect idea here that led to this, it's just we're blaming all these things, but we're not seeing really where we are at. We're missing the forest for the trees.
I couldn't agree with you more. What else you got on your list there?
Yeah. So, okay, you had this, but you're talking about pharmaceutical drug abuse. Particularly, you're talking. Well, it really is abuse, obviously, but particularly you're talking about the psychoactive drugs. But it's not even just the psychoactive drugs. I mean, the painkillers, epidemic of painkillers. It's leading to massive amounts of depression, escapism. Nobody's happy with their lives. They don't want to live their lives, and they just want to drift off in this, this drug-induced bliss. But unprecedented level of drug abuse. We've got this transgender movement going on. That's just absolutely as bad as all of this other LGBTQ plus I whatever. As bad as that is, there's something about this transgender movement seems to me to be just the absolute end game. I mean, I guess you've got pedophilia as well, which is also on the rise, directly connected to this. I think this transgender, this groomer stuff. it's not a joke, right? When all of a sudden you create this ideology that children could be born in the wrong bodies, and you got to get to them early so they can make a decision on it. And then so now we've got to talk to 2-year-olds about sex and masturbation. You're setting those children up to be abused. And when these schools take these kids and create this culture of it's popular to be, part of this rainbow jihad, what's your color, find your perversion. I couldn't believe it, but like I was reading this article about some poor girl that ended up getting she was raised by her grandmother, loving home, but the school convinced her that she was a transgender, that she was actually a boy, and then she got in with some weird group and she got trafficked at, like, I can't remember how old she was, something like 13. Yeah, 13-year-old. Got her in with these wrong guys and they trafficked her, and I think they took her out to Washington or something like that. And the grandmother found her. They chased after her, they found her, they rescued her, and then the government wouldn't give the girl back to them, though, because grandma called her a girl, and the government says, well, she says she's a boy, so that's child abuse. So they wouldn't give her back. They put her in a foster home, and she got trafficked again, a second time. And again, the grandmother hunts her down, finds her in Texas, and has to go to Texas to get her back. And finally, there, the government there was sensible and helped her back. But the story was that the grandmother's telling that for her granddaughter, like, the schools, it's common for pretty much everybody to try to identify as something special. It's not okay to be cisgendered. That's unacceptable. That means you're an oppressor. That means you're a bigot. That means you're hateful. You don't want it. That's really the unpopular thing to be. And so everybody's got it. Well, okay, what can I be? And my own sister was telling me that her daughter was talking to some friends who live in Utah, and this is in the Utah schools as well. Mm-hmm. Absolutely in the Utah schools. In the public schools in Utah right now, most of the kids there are being brainwashed that they have to be part of this somehow. And, if you're not actually, if you don't actually have homosexual desires, the simple solution is then to be transgender. And it's what these kids they're choosing it out of popularity. That's crazy. We've even got hardcore liberals like Bill Maher suddenly coming out talking about this. It's really this many people who are born in the wrong bodies. It's unbelievable. It's just been the last couple of years that this has really became so entrenched. But we've got that. It's connected with the pedophilia. It's connected with the sex trafficking, which is unbelievable too. I watched this documentary on sex trafficking, and it was I'm trying to remember what it was called. I wish I could plug it. It was actually really good though. But one of these guys were doing these sting operations, and they do one of the sting operations in southern Utah. And they had advertised a child available, or 2 children to be available. And on some, I don't even know, this is crazy to me. I don't even know how this guy finds it, but they're filming this, and this guy shows up. I didn't even know it was Utah, but I see this guy show up, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this guy looks like a bishop. He shows up wearing a suit and a white shirt, and he's got like these teddy bear presents for the 2 girls. And they bust him, but how is this happening? How is this happening? How on earth is some literally 60-year-old Mormon dude finding, even if it was a sting operation, it might not have been. That's the thing. It might not have been. And he didn't know the difference. Yet, nonetheless, he knew where to find that kind of stuff. And the fact that people are doing that right now, that this has become a thing at all, is just unconscionable. I don't know. How can we put up with this?
Yeah. And I think Utah is a good barometer, right? Because if we're talking from the God angle, like you and I are, right? Yeah. Utah's a great barometer, right? Because let's face it, if this happens in California, this happens in Oregon, on the coast of Oregon, on the coast of Washington,
yeah,
in New York, right? We're kind of like, yeah, I get it. But when it's happening in Utah, that's a different thing. That means that the soul rot is deep, right? That
So deep.
it's not surface issues. The other thing I just saw today, I'm gonna forward you the picture of it, and I'm actually gonna post it in the show notes here. I know I told you that this may be on YouTube. I don't think this one will be, because I would be flagged so fast.
That's a good point.
There's some that I don't put on YouTube because they'll flag me hard. So feel free to undo that top button if you want. This ain't going on there. But I saw a flyer, and it's Pride Month here in Utah. I don't know if it's a nationwide thing or whatever.
Oh yeah, it's a June thing, I think. Yep. Everywhere.
So there was a flyer, I kid you not, that was from the Church of Satan, that said they were going to be available during Pride Week to unbaptize people.
Oh my gosh.
In Salt Lake City, the Church of Satan, wow. An ordained minister, right? And I get that most Satanists don't believe in, quote, that there's a real Satan. But the premise, the premise is there, right?
I don't think they used to, but these days,
you might be right.
I mean, I get in the 90s. Back in the 90s, it was kind of trendy to be rebellious and,
sure.
And just, all right, rock and satanic symbols because it's cool and rebellious. It's not really cool and rebellious. If you're still there, I think you must have some sort of a buy-in. And I remember the Church of Satan also was doing a legal challenge to the Texas anti-abortion laws.
Mm-hmm.
As well, with the argument that, hey, you know what, killing babies is part of our religious practice. You're infringing on our religious rights by
they made that same statement, Justin, after the leak of Roe v. Wade.
Yeah, how can you really argue these positions though and not actually really be satanic? It is satanic.
It is, and if we're making those declarations, look, there's a pattern that I saw, and I don't want to say I saw it first. I had a good buddy out on the East Coast when I lived in Maryland, whose dad was a rabbi. And we used to have the greatest discussions because he would teach me oral history that you just can't get anywhere else. And he said, every time Israel started sacrificing their children is when God was like, I've had enough. That was ultimately what did him in when Babylon came for him. Was, Jeremiah had said, you have sacrificed your children to Moloch, and we are done. The Lord has passed judgment. And I think we're right there. I want to go back.
We've been there with abortion for a while.
Dude.
But now, and now they just have approved Pfizer for 0 to 5 years old. It's something insane like that, or 1 to 5.
Yep.
I mean, this is they just talked at the WEF about how, man, their goal is to make a vaccine that can be effective for more than a year. That's their goal. This vaccine is way past its expiration date anyways.
Yep.
You're talking about an age group with no COVID illness at all.
Yep.
And a vaccine that they admit no longer works. And they're trying to get it approved to jab babies.
Yep.
If that's not sacrifices to Moloch, what is? And then if they survive that, then that's all right. We've got other ways of sacrificing them. There's the transgender movement, the LGBTQ public school system that will turn them into sex objects.
Yep. I want to go back real quick, if we can, and talk about the substance abuse thing.
Okay, yeah.
Because that one I have some experience with, because I wasn't always a Mormon, right? I wasn't born LDS and then found my way to fundamentalism. I went from my mom being a devout, let me rephrase that. My mom being a Catholic, we went during the holidays, right? Oh, Christmas and Easter. My dad was a disaffected Southern Baptist. And so, while there was a little bit of God talk in the house, wasn't a big deal. So I went from that to LDS to fundamentalist. Now, my dad passed away when I was 13. And as I searched around trying to figure out what happened to what happened to my dad, right? I remember I had the conversation with the pastor there that came to the house. We had some good friends that we went to church with for a while after that. He basically said, if your dad didn't accept Jesus, there's not much we can do. And I'm like, well, what does that mean? And he couldn't give me a straight answer. So I looked around. And then when I was finished looking, I discovered Jack Daniels. And if there was one thing I was really good at from even the tender age of 16 on up to the point I met my wife and became a Mormon, it was drinking. I was super good at drinking. And so those substances, you're trying to fill a hole. You don't drink like that unless you're trying to either fill a hole and just forget about things and zone out for a while.
That's absolutely correct, actually. Yeah. That's what I understand as well. And honestly, even just kind of quickly going back to like the health and fitness stuff, part of that is dealing with addiction, because people are addicted to very unhealthy foods, and learning how to deal with that addiction is crucial. But you don't deal with addiction. I mean, look, I've got a lot of respect for Alcoholics Anonymous and the good that it does. But at the same time, I don't know that that's the optimal solution. I think that to really find healing in Christ, you actually have to come to a place of filling whatever hole is causing that addiction. And that's what I have found with nutrition, is that you're addicted to that, Doritos and dip, or you're, the Twinkies, whatever it is. There's a reason. There's probably an emotion or spiritual reason even that you're overindulging in these unhealthy things. If there's not, then that's great. Then it should be pretty easy to overcome an addiction to it. And an overcome addiction doesn't mean that you're, 500 days sober, but each day is a cliffhanger. That doesn't mean that. That means that you're no longer addicted. And you could, if you partook today, you could choose not to partake again tomorrow. And then go for another year or 5 years. You're in control. And so with this substance abuse addiction, my sister is actually she's a little more mainstream, but she's into psychology and worked on a degree in that. And she was also talking about this, that they're starting to realize that addiction isn't really an issue of a substance causing the addiction. It's the substance is providing immediate relief from a emotional situation that people are in, or potentially a nutritional situation that people are in. And it's providing an immediate release on that. And so if that other things aren't there really is no addiction. And I mean, like, culturally, I've got a little bit of Native American blood in me, and my ancestors as Native Americans were known to be raging alcoholics. But if you think about the scattering that happened to them, and their culture and their way of life being eradicated, it's really no surprise. I don't think it was a genetic issue with the fire water.
No.
I think it was their whole entire way of life and culture being nearly eradicated that led to escaping an addiction.
And that's really what happens, right? Is that I can remember either being drunk or high, and in those moments I was numb. It's not like I felt good, I just didn't feel anything at all, right? And I think we're at that point with our kids, right? Maybe it is drugs and alcohol for some of them, but let's just talk about it from a Mormon aspect. Maybe those kids who are on Ritalin, all the psychotropics, and some kids may actually need it. I don't know of very many, but maybe. I'm willing to give I'm willing to go with the benefit of the doubt. But okay. Yeah, I know I'm Pollyannish in my views.
Well, it's not, to me, it's the funny thing is almost all pharmaceuticals are derived off of things that actually are found in nature. And my reading of the Word of Wisdom is that that there are wholesome herbs that need to be used with wisdom,
Mm-hmm.
and that if used with wisdom, these things can have medicinal benefits, but they have to be used with wisdom. And part of that wisdom is the wisdom God put into it. And when you start studying herbology and stuff, you look at there's so many different types of compounds and alkaloids and things in these plants and in these herbs that all work and different combinations. But the pharmaceutical industry can't patent that. They can't make buco bucks off of that. So what
Right.
they do is they isolate a single compound in that plant, and then they synthetically replicate it in isolation.
Right.
And that's where I think a lot of even aspirin, it's not, there's some serious health risks with aspirin.
Yep.
But you don't have that with white willow bark.
Right. Yeah.
You go back to the natural plant where you're taking it all together, and if you're using it with wisdom, not recreationally, but with a specific intent. I've got an illness. This has properties that will help with that illness. I could see it maybe being working. But as far as the pharmaceuticals that are being produced today, I don't give them any benefit of the doubt. I don't, taking that stuff out of nature that way and isolating it, I don't think any good comes from that.
Right. No, I would tend to agree with you. I'm just trying to,
Yeah.
you know, I never want to be too harsh or too judgmental on what other people are doing because I don't walk in their shoes. Right. Now, as I was saying, if you look at what a lot of these drugs are doing to our kids, they feel empty. They feel hollow. They don't feel anything. Right. And I look back throughout history, I'm like, we got our kids doped up on all this crap. How did we do it before this? Right. If little Jimmy was, pardon the expression, a pain in the ass, right, at school or at home, it was something that was addressed by mom and dad. And little Jimmy found a career that suited his, inclinations to be a pain in the ass. And he usually did really well at that. But now the answer seems to be, let's just dope them up. Let's dope them up. And I saw it with
it's abdicating responsibility again.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. And
a problem child takes a lot of effort. Well, guess what? Mom's got a job. Dad's got a job. They've got to. How else are they going to make ends meet? And so the school's the babysitter, and then they're back from school, and then they don't have time. They don't have interest. They never built these relationships. They don't even know how anymore because they grew up that way too. Stuff. I don't blame anybody, but the people who I think were diabolically inspired, who did know better, and that did this on purpose. Because there's no way that just history just randomly conspired to create this series of events where we're seeing this complete collapse of society. Flip a coin on every decision for every person, and this human race continues and civilization continues. I just, no amount of bad decisions could lead up to this unless it was very carefully orchestrated bad decisions.
Yeah, I don't even blame and I've been honest with it. I spoke about it when I did the episode on the psychotropics. I got suckered into it, right? I mean, yeah. And in thinking about it, I don't blame the doctor who prescribed them, right? I mean, he's doing the best he can with what knowledge he has at his fingertips, right? Yeah. And so,
and the teachers wants your kids subdued because they've got this class. They don't have any opportunity to really connect with any of them to teach them. They're just they're government babysitters, and yet they've got all this responsibility. So they just want some peace and quiet in their class. It's understandable. The pharmaceutical companies, even, they just want to make some money. They're just trying to sell a product that can improve lives. I mean, everybody's got a good reason for it, except it's a bad thing.
Yeah.
It's a really, really bad thing. And the thing is, I think God gives us the law of the harvest with that, though, right? And I mean, sometimes sometimes He has mercy on us because we all make bad mistakes. I've made terrible mistakes in my life, and sometimes I've had to pay the price for those mistakes, and sometimes I've been mercifully been preserved. But because sometimes we do have to pay the price of those mistakes, we might be forgiven spiritually, but the temporal consequences of that can be real and sometimes even permanent. but that can help us keep us on track. That should be a self-correcting mechanism, natural law, that
Right. Absolutely.
that keeps us from self-destructing or going down these dark paths. Yet something's gone wrong, because here we are, and it seems like why are we, where are we going, and why are we in this handbasket?
Right. I want to go back to what we were talking about with the issue of the trans movement,
Yeah.
because I think that speaks to, as I look at the kid, I can't believe I'm old enough to say this. As I look at the kids now, right? They're I don't think any of them are coming from a bad spot, right? If they're an advocate, or I shouldn't, let me phrase it. I don't think they're coming at it as I'm going to purposely, willfully disobey God, right?
Of
And
course not.
they're and again, I think this speaks to a lack that we as parents have done, or a lack of meaning we've given our kids, but with the ones who are advocates, right, for that lifestyle, for those choices, they want to be the ones to be like, don't oppress my friends, right? They're looking for a cause. Our kids are woefully starving for a, something of meaning, something of value, something of 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 righteousness. And I think society as a whole has failed those kids terribly, right?
Oh, absolutely.
They're looking for that.
They are. They're looking for it. I mean, it's interesting, but there's this concept of the shoot, what is it? The cycles, the four cycles. Can't think of the author's name all of a sudden. The Fourth Turning is the book.
I've read that book. The prophet, there were the prophet. Oh,
Yeah, there's the
prophets were one
prophets,
of
the
them.
nomads, the
Artists.
the warriors, and the artists.
Yeah. Yep.
And what we should be seeing is a generation of warriors, and they should be fighting for the right cause. But I think they've been co-opted, and that is exactly. We have a generation that is thirsting for a cause. Here's the thing. Okay, pop culture reference, right? But did you see? You go to the movies, you see a superhero movie. I mean, there's been millions of them, right? The Avengers and all that. You ever see the audience cheering for the bad guy? Was anybody cheering for Loki? Like, man, when Loki was telling those people that he's gonna subject them and that they were born to fear and born to be ruled, man, the audience just cheered along with Loki, right? Not at all. Not at all. Everybody was ecstatic when the Hulk finally threw him around and smashed him, because innately everybody still has that desire for good. It's still there, and if we don't recognize that, we're rejecting the divinity and Christ with the manifestation of Christ within them, which is another grave error that we can make in judgment.
I had these conversations with my kids. One was with my oldest son when we were talking about the founding fathers. And he's like, I don't know why you're so into this, and you're boring me to tears. And he goes, I don't get it. And it dawned on me one day, I'm showing them in the wrong light. And so I had this conversation. I was like, do you like it when I tell you what to do? He's like, no, I don't. I was like, do you hate being under somebody's thumb? Oh, absolutely, I do. I was like, so did Washington. So did Jefferson. Read this and then see if you see it differently. I had the same conversation with my son. In the church I attend, we'll do work parties or something like that. And he's like, why do we got to do this? And I'm like, well, what do you want? If you could remake society, what would society look like? And he kind of talks about it, where people are taken care of, but yet everyone works hard and everyone's got a purpose. And I'm like, right, that's what we're doing here, right? That we're trying to help out. We're trying to make something better. And when I put it in that light, both my boys shifted, right? Their perspective shifted. And I don't want to say it like I was a good dad, because I wasn't. I just happened to stumble into it. Like everything good in my life, I just happened to bump into the right way sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what it was, right? But once their perspective shifted and they felt like they had a worthy cause, they went with it and they worked towards it. I'll say this for this generation: they are thirsting for that. And when they find it, they will latch on like a bulldog and not let go. But we just, and when I say we, I mean society, hasn't done a good job of giving them a worthy cause.
Yeah.
The other thing is, I think we're in a place now where victimhood seems to be the new social currency, right? So
Yeah.
if that's the new social currency, well, the richest among us are those perceived as victims. And there's a certain amount of victimhood that you get to cloak yourself in if you identify as trans or any of the other letters of the alphabet.
But ultimately, that's coming from a place of fear, right?
Yep.
It's not knowing whether I'm good enough. I don't know whether I can make it. I don't know whether. So what it is it's being a victim is a way out. You don't have to be tested. You don't have to be tried. You can just be a victim and never have to find out, which is tragedy. But that's stealing, especially for boys. I think that's stealing an
Absolutely
essential aspect of masculinity, where instead of finding out who you really are, whether you make it, and you know what, that was part of my life, was trying and failing and trying and failing. I got married pretty late in my life. I was mid 30s. So I've got a pretty young family, maybe early 30s. My wife's over there. Maybe early 30s. But regardless, I had served a mission in the LDS Church. I got back. I was ready for the next phase of my life, I thought. But I really wasn't. Looking back, I can see that, man, I had a lot to learn. And I learned a lot over about 11 years of trying and failing and 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 failing and failing and failing until I finally figured it out. And I stopped, and I was able to deal with and overcome basically personal flaws that were preventing me from being able to find the right person and be worthy of the right person. And that failure process sucks.
Sure it does.
That trying and failing process sucks. But I just look back and I think, man, if that first relationship had worked out in marriage, where would my life be right now? Who would I be right now? And it's terrifying to think about. It's terrifying to think about. And so, but that's the thing. And I could have chosen that path. I wasn't given that option, but it could have been, hey, you know what? You tried, you fell in love, you found some girl, you wanted to marry her, it didn't work out. You can be a victim for the rest of your life. I've got family that went down that road, and eternal bachelorhood over that type of stuff. But I wouldn't have grown, right? I wouldn't have grown, and if I hadn't grown, then how that's such an essential part of, that's what we're here for. We're on this earth to become more than what we brought with us.
Absolutely.
To choose God, to receive ordinances and blessings, but also to be transformed, for our character to become transformed, to become more like Christ. And man, if you're going to be a victim, then you don't get that. The atonement can't work in your life. It's a stealing the opportunity for progression.
Absolutely. And it's such a perfect plan that our Heavenly Father gave us, because our mistakes and our failures are every bit as vital as our successes. I played a lot of football in high school, ended up playing a little semi-pro ball later on in life, tried out for a team, got accepted. And I remember once we had this great team. I mean, we just meshed well. And all of us had, you know, it seemed like the perfect makeup for the position we played. And we got to a point in the season where we started thinking about, you know what, we're going to go undefeated. We just can't be beat. And we got by on just pure talent, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there were a couple close games there. And I remember one game we lost, right? And it wasn't by much, but we lost. And we were in the locker room. I remember the coach came in. He's like, I am so glad this happened now before playoffs. He's like, because you guys have been skating along with just talent, just getting by just on that. And he's like, that's not enough. And so then we went back and we broke down the game film. And he's like, you've been doing this all year, but you've been able to skate by. This has to be fixed, right? And now all of a sudden we're humbled and we have to look at it. Our failures serve that same purpose, right? Whether it's the gospel, whether we're at work, whatever it is, those failures are so vital to our learning. And the beautiful part of the plan is that as long as you're not purposely failing, not purposely sinning, we're going to get through this, right? We're going to get an opportunity to repent, to look at the game film and make the corrections necessary and move on. And I think in sheltering our kids from those failures, we've done them a massive disservice, right? We haven't shown them that you are capable of failure. You're capable of tremendous things, but you're also capable of failing fantastically. And then teaching them to move on from those failures. And I think this ties in with victimhood because they're above failing. You know, we don't look at a victim as a failure, as ever failing.
Being a victim means you don't have to try,
right?
But you're
exactly.
not. But you're not a failure. You didn't try.
Right.
You didn't have to try. You are exempt from trying, and so you get the reward you get the accolades of the winner, without actually having won. But you're also robbed of the opportunity to fail. That's why it's like, oh, I don't need to. You don't have to be afraid. It's an easy out if it's being sold that way, and that's how it is packaged. And I think that's why we're seeing this victim culture.
Yep.
Absolutely, because especially that seems more at the college level, but it's probably seeped down into the elementary schools even as well these days. So.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
What else do you have on your list there?
Yeah, let's look at some of these other things. We've also, I think we've got, all right, the fall of our democracy. This is a pretty big one to me, but I think that, there's been a lot of political manipulation. I've seen these political machinations up close. I was a state delegate for the Republican Party back in, I think, 2008. And I mean, I've seen the corruption firsthand, and I've heard plenty of secondhand accounts of the political corruption in place. And we're no longer really a representative democracy. But it seems like just this last presidential election really just cemented in the fact that we are absolutely not a democracy anymore. The blatantness, the out in the open, in your face nature of the voter fraud, it was shocking to me. Because I mean, like I said, I think that these manipulations, this is nothing particularly new, but the scope of it and the brazenness of it is just mind-boggling to me. I mean, like, I remember when they were doing the counting, and all of a sudden it's like, all right, we're going to stop counting in the middle of the night, even though it's really close, and we're going to board up the windows and kick out all the people who's supposed to watch these things. And then the next morning, lo and behold, a whole bunch of extra votes for somebody else came in. I mean, I don't think anybody really buys that narrative. If they've unless you got some people that kind of manipulated by media, of course, too. That's another huge issue we've got. But the openness of the voter fraud that we're seeing happening here, and then there's the complete violation of our rights during these lockdowns and these attempted coercive vaccinations, just really goes to show that we're not really living in a free country anymore.
No,
We don't really even get to pick who we vote to betray us.
no, you're 100% correct. And look, I want to make it clear that I didn't think that Trump was the savior of the republic, so to speak, right? I
No,
think he definitely slowed that train down a little bit, but I don't he's definitely better. I would sure take a mean tweet and some cheap gas at this point, right? Don't get me wrong.
exactly. Yeah,
But
I think at this point everybody would.
but it's not like I think that he was the savior of the republic. Having said that, and we're going to get into this a little later on in this discussion. I don't want to go into it too deeply right now, but I do want to say that I think Trump scared the establishment.
Yeah.
Right. And
Yep.
because realistically, everything we're seeing come to pass now has been about a plan that has been 100 years in the making. And I think they saw a guy who was an outsider that undid a bunch of it in a hurry. And I talked earlier about those birth pangs coming quicker and faster. And I think he scared those people who do have the nefarious intentions and said, we're going to accelerate now. We're so close. We can't let this happen.
Yeah, I completely agree. One of the rules, though, of that 100-year plus conspiracy, though, is you don't take off the majority. And what we've seen individual groups of people kind of get marginalized, targeted, and then these slow culture shifts happen. But something has drastically changed because as far as the acceleration of things going, because by all accounts, they should be backing off. By all accounts, they should be backing off, giving us a breath before the next contraction. And instead, what they've doubled down. Instead, it's out in the open. I mean, the stuff that's going on right now in Sweden, they're just talking about this stuff openly. It's in our face, and they know that we don't want it. They know the majority does not want this, and they're telling us you're going to have it anyways. And to me, it's like part of me just keeps saying, what do they know that I don't know? Because by all accounts, they're pushing this country to a degree that what it should happen naturally, what should happen is a massive revival.
Yeah.
Of God and Christianity and good wholesome principles in our country. When they push this bad stuff to the extent that, when they push bad economics to the point that gas is going to, they had to update the programming on the gas pumps to be able to handle $10 a gallon gas. Yep. I don't think it's hit that yet, but they had to update the programming on those things because they're anticipating it, and they're doing. And then in the midst of that, we've got the White House canceling these leases for oil drilling. They canceled the pipeline. We're not going to take imports from China, Russia, as if Russia would at this point. It's just like it's so in your face, deliberate. It's like, yeah, you don't like that, and we're going to make it even worse. Just normally that kind of thing produces a massive positive backlash, and that's why it's a slow pot that boils the frog. Something's changed because they've decided, forget the slow pot. Let's get a pot of lava.
Yeah, no, I think they got spooked. I really do. I think that they saw, oh crap, we can't lose everything we've worked for. Let's just get this thing to the finish line. Biden just a couple days ago came out and said, I know gas prices are high, but hopefully at the end of this, we'll be a stronger country and a stronger globe because we will have moved on from fossil fuels. And I feel like
the numbers for that don't work, though. There's not enough batteries and solar panels and stuff. That just the economics of that doesn't work. Oh, I just lost. Are you still there?
I'm here.
Oh, okay. Yeah, my computer just glitched.
Okay. No, I'm still here.
Okay.
I feel like now they have they don't care, right?
Yeah,
They're just like, you're gonna take it. That's all there is to it. You're going to take this. Um, I just want to paint the picture of how bad the economic outlook is, because today, just today,
yeah,
I had literally just stepped out of my meeting 5 minutes after you texted me and said, "Can we talk?" And that's when we made the decision to do this.
yeah,
We are bracing for impact. So, as a surveyor, I'm pretty intimately involved with all the ins and outs of the construction industry, right? And what it takes to build something, whether it's a subdivision, a building, whatever it is. I get it. I have a crew of about 12 guys. Today, I spent the day in meetings where we talked about what things are going to look like. Right now, along the Wasatch Front, concrete is so hard to get that every construction company only gets 200 yards of concrete for their company, not their project, their company.
wow.
200 yards sounds like a lot, but it's not a lot,
No,
right?
not a lot.
Because we can't get potash anymore as the substance, the kind of the thickener for the concrete. Potash is produced when you process coal. One of the first things that Biden did when he came in is he shut down most of the coal. So we don't get potash now. The other thing we're up against is, how are we going to deal with $6 a gallon gas? It doesn't work. The math does not work. So if we have those kind of shortages and we have that kind of problems with gas, on top of that, we have inflation, right?
Yeah.
I was fortunate. I was able to get my guys a raise this year. There's a lot of companies that can't. How do
Well,
those guys?
You're fortunate you even have guys.
Right, right. That's the other thing, right?
The other weird thing is, like, in the midst of all of this, all of a sudden we can't find people to work anymore. Nobody wants to work.
Nope, nope, they don't. And so I was fortunate enough to get them a raise to try to help offset that. But at the pace that inflation is going, it won't keep up with wages, right? So actually, you'll be taking a loss in the year. If you've saved your money and it's in a 401k, it's decreased, right? Inflation makes your dollar worth less. And eventually, if we keep on this, worthless. And so we've gotten to this point with the economy where I think we all know that this thing's coming down. There's no way it can keep going. Brace for impact. That's exactly right. And that was kind of the overarching theme of all those meetings I was in today. 9 hours worth of meetings on brace for impact, right? And I've only had to do this one other time, which was in 2008. This time I think it's worse, because in 2008, we at least had the oil field in North Dakota, right? Guys could go out there and work. We don't have that now. There's nothing here. And we're going into a phase where I think we're going to see the transformation of our economic system.
Yeah. Well, they said so. The Great Reset. You'll own nothing and be happy.
Yep.
And those people are all off meeting right now, talking openly about how they're going to be doing this, and the medical tyranny.
Where are they meeting at? What's the name of that meeting that they're all meeting at?
The Davos thing, the World Economic Forum, Davos group. They're out in Sweden.
Right, and that's happening right now.
Yeah, they're out there. I think they're still. Yeah, they're still. Today might have been. I'm not sure, but they've been out there all week, and they were out there today, and they're talking about it. And the stuff's coming out. The stuff that's coming out is terrifying. The kinds of things they're talking about. They're talking about how they're gonna, force these new wonderful new technologies, these pills that will know whether you swallowed them or not and can report back. They're gonna put this complete, they've got these systems for tracking everybody's individual carbon footprint. So, I mean, it's just the world view that it's 1984, kind of a complete control system is what they're aiming for. And we're seeing that the housing crisis we've got right now too is insane. But a lot of that is you've got these huge mega funds. These what are they? What's the name? BlackRock.
BlackRock. Yep.
Main Street Company or something. There's like 5 or 6 of them. They control most of the wealth in the world. They're out there buying up all of the properties. That's one of the reasons why you can't find anything to purchase, and because they don't want people to own stuff. We're going to move towards a rental system where everybody's dependent on a rental system. It's just this. It's a Hegelian dialectic, right? They create a problem, so that they can then present a solution. It's the thesis, antithesis, synthesis. They have this idea of the synthesis. They want a world of where they control everything. How do you get there? Well, we need a solution where the world with them controlling everything is. They need a problem where them controlling everything is the solution. So, you reverse engineer that, and it's like, okay, it's what we're seeing. What they started with Obamacare, which may or may not have been somewhat one of those things derailed by Trump to a degree in the economy. But I think the intention behind Obamacare ultimately was single payer. They wanted single payer. So let's come up with a non-single payer method system that is so broken that it'll collapse in on itself. And the only solution at that point that people will accept is a single payer. And that's how we'll get into completely socialized medicine in the United States.
I think you're right.
That's the Hegelian dialectic.
I think you're right. Because the other thing I've noticed about people who love control is they love it when people have to beg them for it. Right. And so I think I have a probably my best friend besides my wife, surveyed for years together, just a really good guy. His wife is a hospital administrator. And she had said that plan was nothing more than a way of collapsing the system so that people cried out for the single payer option. Because when you go ask somebody who's in power for something and they give it to you, you've made a social bargain with them.
Yeah. So we got to look at this situation right now, right? Gas is at $7. Oh, so what is this crisis? Because we know this is intentional. I mean, oh my goodness. If Biden, at the very least, I mean, we sent our bunch of reserves to Ukraine. We've shut down our domestic fields. We canceled the pipeline. This is intentional. This is absolutely intentional. So they know that it's going to cause the prices of things to skyrocket. What problem is that going to create that they're going to then come in and be the savior of with some solution? Right, it's the Great Reset. It's this modern take on communism,
state capitalism, as the Chinese would call
it. Yeah, right. Yep. So we got the economic stuff, and I have a friend out in South Dakota who was watching during all that COVID stuff going on, and when the price of 2x4s was like doubling and just kept going up and up and up. And South Dakota is where the U.S. gets a lot of its lumber from. And there's mills there. There's trees, lots of mills. These huge cities that are giant mills. And he was saying that when he was out there, they were shut down. The mills weren't even running.
Yeah.
I mean, like the price of 2x4s are skyrocketing. You think they'd make a fortune if they were to start selling 2x4s, right? But it turns out some gigantic companies had come in and purchased all of the small local mills a few years earlier. And for some reason, the mills were on some stand down order and they were not running. They were not producing lumber, and prices. The point is it's an intentional. It's a deliberate collapse. It's a deliberate collapsing. And
Yeah.
so we got to be looking at that from a perspective of, how are they going to benefit from it? Why would they do that? There's got to be some angle, some benefit. And I think it comes down to this diabolic power and control. They've got a new system in place, and they're going to make us hurt so bad that they're going to make us hurt so bad we're going to be happy to own nothing but at least be alive.
Right. No, I agree with you. And I find it interesting that if you go back into Genesis and you start looking at how Pharaoh became Pharaoh, right? After Joseph died, and it talks about how there was famine in the land. And so people first started bringing their money to buy wheat. And then when they ran out of money, they started bringing their cattle to trade with Pharaoh essentially for wheat. And then eventually they gave up their land to Pharaoh for wheat. Nothing's changed. It's all the same stuff. Maybe it's packaged now for modern consumption. But at the end, what are we willing to trade so you can feed your kids?
Yeah.
If you don't have anything, what are you willing to do? And that's a spooky thought. But I think we're there at the moment.
Absolutely. Well, and another thing we've got going on here is this unprecedented level of internet censorship. I mean, uh, that also has just taken on a new degree of unbelievable. It's just unbelievable. I mean, the government's proposing this Ministry of Truth. It's just straight out of Orwell.
Yeah. They're like I said, they're not hiding it anymore.
Yeah. It's just so in our faces. And so, I mean, so this is all a lot of dark stuff. But I think it's important that we're aware, because I talked earlier a little bit about the natural law of things, right? We're going to be responsible for our decisions. And, we've all made bad decisions in the past. That's part of how we grow. But I think we're coming to a point where we're going to have to start making some really hard decisions. And these decisions are going to be more than just, part of our growing process. These are going to be existential decisions, whether we recognize it or not. And making the wrong decision on these things, I think, could be absolutely, absolutely disastrous. And we might. Well, I don't think the vaccines is one of these issues, but it's a similar one. A lot of people were put under immense pressure to take these vaccines, and some people were willing to give up their careers and their jobs in order to maintain their sovereignty over that. And some people caved in. And again, the people who caved in are not bad people. They're victims of this horrible, horrible system. But nonetheless, there has been consequences. I know there's a lot of people that thought, well, President Nelson in the LDS Church said we should get the vaccine. And I'm generally been an anti-vaxxer, but the prophet has said this is okay. Well, it's okay. I'll be preserved. I can make this decision, and God will protect me, even though I think that this is a bad thing and I disagree with it. And people have made those decisions, and they're paying the natural consequences, unfortunately. I mean, I imagine some of them have been miraculously spared, but all too many have not been miraculously spared.
I looked at the whole vaccine thing as that's something that everybody should pray about and come to their own conclusion. Because this idea that there's a one size fits all for this is insanity, right? And if you're just going to take the word of somebody because you hold them in esteem, well, you're relying on the arm of flesh. I guess in a perfect world, I think there would have been, a leader who would have came out and said, you know what? Here's what I'm going to admonish you to do. Take it before the Lord and and get your own answer.
At the least. Right. I mean, even better would be an inspired prophet who could tell us in the name of the Lord whether this is a good thing or a bad thing.
Right. Exactly.
But absent that, at the very least, an admonition to figure it out for yourself. But at this point, the data that is coming in on these vaccines, the trial data, it's no. I understand. I understand taking a more of a neutral, get your own inspiration approach, and I still think that might be valid in the case of like if it was your job at stake type of a situation. If you did it to keep your job, then you know what? I sure hope that the Lord has mercy on you, because the stuff we're seeing from the clinical trials now coming out is that this vaccine was poison from the beginning.
It was at best a therapeutic, at best, right? In the sense that there may be, and even this data is shaky now.
Well,
right?
They just came out with that, and actually, technically, compared to the control group, the efficacy of preventing serious health related to COVID and all that in the trial turned out to be statistically insignificantly worse than the control group. So it's actually not even mildly therapeutic. It wasn't even mildly therapeutic, is what the actual data is showing. When looked at by, people who aren't paid to say that the data, they were basically told they get to police themselves. Collect all the data, police yourselves. You tell us whether it works or not, and we'll rubber stamp it, is what the CDC said. And so Pfizer did, and they ran their studies, and they sent the data in, and they said, yeah, the data says it's safe and that it's effective. And so the CDC said, all right, it's safe and effective. And now that people are looking at the raw data, we're seeing, okay, it's not safe at all, and it wasn't even effective.
So I feel like I need to say this, right? Because one of the things I said early on in this podcast is I was always going to be honest with the audience. Early on, my wife had medical conditions that concerned us. We took the vaccine. We did. Looking back, I don't think I would, if I could have done the Geico commercial where I ran back in time and beat myself up for doing it, I would have, because we all ended up catching it anyway. Right?
Yeah.
And
I think everybody did.
Yeah, everybody got it, right? And yeah, we were very fortunate in the sense that we've had no health problems or issues or whatever the case is. And so I'll never fault someone for taking it. But
absolutely.
But knowing what we know now, right, we can obviously see that it's not what it was promised to be.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and I was really a lot more concerned about COVID when it first came out too. I mean, when it was still in China, I heard about it while it was still in China. Even before Nancy Pelosi was hanging around, Chinatown in San Francisco saying, "Hey, stop being racist. This isn't anything to be worried about." If anybody remembers that far back. At that time, I was looking at China, and I'm looking at the data there of what little data was coming out of there, I was saying this could be a big deal. And I was pretty concerned and very, very careful in the early stages of the pandemic, because we didn't know what we were dealing with.
Right. Yeah, no.
And afterwards, okay. Now that I know, it's like, all right, I was probably, overly vigilant in that regards, and I got suckered into some narratives. That kind of thing happens.
I think that time was easy for us to get sucked in, because even guys like you and I, who naturally are a little more, cynical about what the powers may do, there was so much unknown there, right? So when they first proposed the 2-week lockdown and then it turned into a month, I'm like, probably a good thing. Let's just all work from home. And in some ways, I thought maybe this is a blessing. Maybe this is the Lord telling everybody, you better get real, right? You better understand, because during that time, the first part of COVID, I was still in the LDS church. I had a leadership position, right?
Oh,
wow. I held my fundamentalist views, but I still had, I still kept them on the down low. And the thing I was surprised by is that when you locked everybody in the house together, you found out real quick just what kind of condition your family was really in. Right. And just
I had the exact same thoughts that, maybe this is a good thing. It's forcing families to come together and they can work their stuff out. Maybe they can come back with stronger relationships. I was looking for the positives.
Right.
And there were some. Yeah. There really were some.
Yeah. But once we passed about that 1 month mark, right? And you really saw the data coming in, right? And
Yeah.
then the report started coming out that all those people who were dying with COVID had 2.5 morbidity factors on top of COVID.
Well, then on top of that, they start saying you got to wear masks everywhere.
Yeah, then all of a sudden you're like, okay, no, something else is up.
Yeah.
And so we yeah, like I said, I just wanted to be honest there and say, you know what, I probably would, no, let me phrase that. I definitely wouldn't take the vaccine again. Or if I had it to do over again, I wouldn't.
Yeah.
We
But these are still situations where we've got time. These are decisions that we've got time. But I strongly believe that the time is coming where we're going to have to make decisions that are going to be literally life and death decisions.
I agree with you. My wife and I have those conversations daily now, right? Where
Yeah.
I feel like we've boarded the train to Crazy Town and we're almost there. And I think if people are honest with themselves, I think everybody feels it, right? They may not know it, right? But everybody feels it, right? Everybody feels the event is on the horizon.
Oh, I mean, look at all this socially, with the stuff with sexuality, the economically. We've got the drug abuse and the escapism. I mean, the lack of religion, this spiritual warfare. This is unsustainable. And for a long time, I wanted to believe we could turn things around, that the country could actually start getting better again. And I was a sincere advocate for a while. Eventually, I became a cynical advocate, where I decided that, you know what, I don't know that this can be turned around, but I'm going to fight. I'm going to fight for the good stuff anyway. I'm going to try to hang on. But then there came and recently there's just been this absolute realization that we are on a train that cannot be stopped or slowed down. And it's just going to be a matter of surviving ourselves and if we can be of service to the Lord.
Right.
In helping other people prepare spiritually or temporally for the impact.
I want to go there, but I don't want to go there quite yet because I feel like we've done a good job of talking about where we are at, right? I think we've painted a real good picture of where a nation that's full of rot of the soul.
It's unsustainable though, right? This is the fall of Rome this is civilization cataclysmic level of unsustainable.
And just not America, but the Western way of life, right?
Well, that's the other thing too, right? Yeah, this time it's a global issue. It's not just Rome.
Right.
We live in a global world with a global economy and all of the global. But that means this cultural rot, is global.
Yep.
This economic trash is global. This deliberate destruction of individual sovereignty and ownership is global. All of this stuff is going to affect everybody. The fall of not just Western civilization, but I think civilization as a whole is what we're looking at here.
Right. So let me ask you this. How did we get here?
I think we got here really we missed the signs. And I'm mostly, I guess, to a certain degree, blaming myself here.
Sure. No, I get it.
I'm not
right
coming
there.
from because I didn't come from a fundamentalist family, so I don't have that background. And I was raised that we need to fight this stuff. That there's spiritual warfare going on, and I look back and I just think, man, how many times could I have been more bold? How many times could I have stood up for the truth and the right more clearly? If I had understood the consequences then, what would I do differently? And it's amazing to think of the opportunities that were tragically missed because I wasn't taking it seriously. To me, it's a political battle. It's not a spiritual battle. This is something that, it's issues, and I got caught up on the issues. And I think what we are absolutely undeniably facing here is it's a conspiracy. This is the culmination of a secret combination that has been at play, like you mentioned, for 100 years, probably even more. And it is coming to a head now, but the only real solution to this ever was Christ.
Mm-hmm.
That was always the solution. It was the only savior that we've got. And even in my own life, pursuing my own calling and filling my own role in this, I didn't treat it this right. I didn't fight this the right way. I didn't recognize the battle for what it was. And I think that's ultimately, as a whole, what happened with this country is we thought it was an issue. We thought it was a this. We were tricked, and we didn't realize that the solution wasn't this law. The solution wasn't that law. The solution has always, always, always been Christ.
Yeah.
And we found substitutes. We found other, more, less in your, we were afraid of offending people, maybe, at least from on my end. I didn't want to come across too much as like some radical Christian, and so I might have these religious values, but I'm going to make these arguments from a political perspective. I'm going to argue this from an economic perspective. I'm going to make a stand here and push for the good things, and we're going to use education and information, and we're going to wake people up. And now here, as we approach this terminal point, looking back, it's like this has always been a spiritual war, and I did not have my spiritual armor and sword equipped. And I think that's how we got here, as the whole, the church, the country.
Yeah.
We didn't understand.
Excuse me. I think it was the normalcy bias. Have you heard of that?
Yeah, sure, but go ahead.
So there's something that happens within our psychology, right? Something that's wired in us. It's a survival mechanism. And when crap hits the fan or crap gets real, we have a tendency to try to revert to something that's normal. I read an interesting book on 9/11, and it talked about people who, midway going down the stairs, turned around and said, I gotta go shut my computer off. When they were coming out of the towers. And the psychologist was like, what is that? Right? Like, do you not understand that a plane just hit this building, a big plane? What's going on? And it's the normalcy bias. It's one of those things where you do something or you go someplace where you feel comforted, right? Animals do it a lot. They found that certain wounded animals have a place that they're familiar with that they go back to. People do it. And so I think as we've passed these various mile markers along this path to apocalypse, so to speak, or collapse, as we passed them, we reverted to that, right? We said, this can't be planned, right? No one really wants to see the United States fall, right? Nobody wants to do away with the Western way of life. Nobody wants that. And we went to that place of comfort rather than stare the beast in the face and say, well, if this was a court, the preponderance of evidence shows that no, this is coordinated. I know I was certainly guilty of that, right? And the other thing is that I think those in power with nefarious purposes have been very good at keeping us fighting amongst ourselves. They have kept us at each other's throats, and in the process, they've been able to work behind the scenes to get done what it is they've wanted to get done. They very much used our lack of unity in their favor, because you had two camps that you were going to choose from, right? Your camp R or your camp B.
It's always been two camps. Yeah.
Right. And that's and go back to what Washington said in his farewell address: stay out of foreign entanglements and don't get involved with parties. Right. That was the message. And we managed
a third party system.
Right. And we managed to do that. But yeah, and keeping us at each other's throats, they've been able to keep us fighting amongst ourselves while they did what they had to do to institute this new program.
Well, it goes back to what I was talking about with everybody likes to think they're the good guy. I mean, ultimately, even in his own mind, I have no doubt that Hitler probably thought he was the hero of the story.
Hmm.
Everybody has this innate desire for good, but we also have this natural tendency to find somebody's a little different from us. They're somebody else. They're the enemy.
They're the other.
They're the opposition. They're the other. And yeah, that separation is exactly right, and that's where we need to look at this differently now. We can't look at, oh, you're a liberal, you're my enemy. You are pro-vax, you are pro-mask, you're pro these things that I'm against. We've got to say, where is the common ground here? Can I see Christ in that person? Can I see elements of Christ to build upon and to focus upon? And can we find things that we can come to unity with? And that's the
Right.
crazy thing. There is there is a shift. I think there is a shift happening where we're starting to see unlikely people taking very different stances, because in the past it was always political, but we're moving beyond this, the politics, into the realm of reality. I guess that's one of the crazy things with this whole transgender movement is at its conclusion, transgenderism is the denial, absolute denial of reality. It's the
Yeah.
ultimate denial of reality. If a man can be a woman, if woman is man, if these things don't mean anything anymore, then nothing means anything anymore. That's not a TV, that's an elephant. That's not a tiger, that's a car. Why not, right? There's the
Right.
complete any semblance of objective reality just falls to pieces. And so what we're now seeing, instead of left versus right, we're starting to see people who believe in reality versus people who don't believe in reality. But even here, the people who don't believe in reality aren't our real enemy. They're our brothers and our sisters. And if we see them as enemies, we're just playing right into the true enemy's hands.
And this is where I'm probably going to lose some folks as far as being able to be with me here on this. I think this story is as old as time, right? I think this goes back to Master Mayhem himself, right?
Nothing new under the sun.
Yeah, I think these are the same covenants that Cain made. I think these are the same covenants that the Gadianton and robbers made when they covenanted with each other and with the adversary, because they're after the same thing: wealth, power, and domination. And
Well,
those up top who have those ambitions have kept us, have been able to pacify us enough to where we have allowed it.
if you look at the ultimate outcome of all of those, though, with Cain, the whole pre-Diluvian world was destroyed.
Right.
The Jaredites dabbled in those secret combinations. Their civilization was destroyed. The Nephites dabbled in it. That was given as the cause for the destruction of the Nephite civilization in the
Yep.
Book of Mormon.
Tower of
And
Babel.
yeah, Tower of Babel. And now here we are, coming to seeing the fruits of these secret combinations coming to a head. And I mean, really, what do we expect? If we're especially if we're not willing to look at it and identify and see the spade for a spade.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. So what do we do now? We've identified where we're at. We know how we got here. We know without naming names how how
Well,
how do we get out?
yeah, I think this is pretty radical, but ultimately we're all here. Where we're at now, history is coming to a head, but we are just people, and there were people before us, and people before them, and people before them, and we're here to be tried and tested to see whether we're going to do all things whatsoever the Lord God shall command us. And as we do those things, we attain forgiveness and salvation and redemption, and that's really what it's all about. But we've got another thing at play here. But as far as the real purpose of life goes, ultimately, we're here to serve God. It's as simple as that, and there's nothing unique about that aspect. That part hasn't changed. What I do think has changed, though, is I believe that we're here for a special reason. Anybody probably listening to this has probably felt immense calling in their life. I know
Hmm.
that I have. It's what brought me into the church from a Jack Mormon family, and it's what took me out of the church, being a faithful, devoted, completely loyal, adherent. And if you're feeling that there's something in your life, that there's some purpose, there's some calling, then I'd say that there is. And it's not that we're going to get out of this, because I don't believe we are.
No.
We're not getting out of this. The death is the only way out. And as terrible as that is from the secular world, though, ultimately, that's the thing. That's the shooting. My heart breaks for those families that are left behind. But for the children that perished, we know that they were welcome to the arms of Christ.
Right.
They're not in a bad place anymore. It's the families that were left behind, and it's the poor boy that did that shooting. That is the one in the dark place, and the one who's probably suffering the absolute most right now. And so that's who my heart goes out to more than necessarily the poor children that were taken. So in that sense, we have if we have lived a good life, if we are prepared to meet Jesus, as the billboards as the billboards ask, then you know what, it's okay. Things might get bad, terrible things might happen, and our lives might be extinguished. That's not the end, though. So that's not the absolute terrible thing that a secular atheist world thinks it is. It's not the ending of our life. It's just a transition. But for those but if you feel a calling and you think that there's something, that I believe that there's a refining process we're about to go through, because again, with this, the pre or the post millennial eschatology here is that we need to be ready to build Zion.
Hmm.
And if I'm being honest with myself, as much as I'd like to say, hey, I'm ready, I am not ready. I am not ready. I still make foolish decisions. I've got a lot of stuff I still got to work through. And seeing these calamities like a giant tidal wave out in the ocean coming, knowing they're coming, I see it as an opportunity. It's a refining opportunity, and it's going to suck and it's going to be unpleasant. But if we survive, then we're going to be given an opportunity to repent in a way like no other. We're going to have our priorities fixed like no other. And we're going to be given an opportunity to be worthy of Christ and his presence. And that's what happened to the Nephite civilization, right? When the Nephite civilization collapsed, those who were the most righteous were the ones in the darkness and in the ruins mourning.
Hmm.
They endured that process. They survived. But they were not spared.
No.
So that's the thing. They were not spared. They endured. But through that process, they were then prepared for Christ to come and visit and minister to them personally. And I think that nothing short of us being able to receive that power and to receive that kind of a blessing is going to leave any I mean, this could be, I mean, the sci-fi people, right, and the atheists, they talk about, like, that humans, we might wipe ourselves out off of we could exterminate ourselves. And I think that there is a possibility with the kind of stuff that's going on right now and where the world is heading. If there wasn't a God, I think there's a real possibility that we could literally completely annihilate ourselves, and
Yeah.
there'd be no humans left on Earth, the way things are heading. But I think there's a process. I don't think we can turn this around, and
No, I don't.
I don't even think it's necessarily about enduring at this point, as much as it is preparing to be ready to serve, because that's what it is. If you look at the disciples, it was John the Beloved who told Christ. Well, we assume, right, because we have the three Nephites that of three Nephite apostles who chose to stay and minister. And we have John the Beloved who chose to stay and minister. The rest of them were like, hey, when our job's done, we want to just go up and be done.
Right.
We want to go receive our reward. some of these early apostles, four of them, three of the Nephites and John, decided, hey, you know what? Even when we're done, I'd still like to stay and serve. I would like to be left behind and go through this process so that I can be there to serve and help and guide. And that's, I think, what the calling that a lot of us feel, what that calling really is. It's a calling to be a laborer in the vineyard. And
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
yeah, go ahead. No. I've been talking for a while. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think we're all going to go through this, right?
Yeah.
There's no one who's coming out of this without some scars. The question is, are those of us who hold these fundamentalist views or orthodox views of Mormonism now going to step up and become the light bearers? Because fear and hunger is a volatile mixture, worse than any Molotov cocktail we could ever produce.
Yeah.
And I think we now have to be the people to stand up and show a different way. And I'm not sure there's a people that's maybe better prepared for it than we are. And I'm not saying we're greatly prepared, but I'm saying, you know, we might be the, okay, this strikes close to home given my body stature. We might be the skinniest kid at fat camp, right? So
yeah.
So we might. Go ahead.
I agree. I absolutely agree, but there's a little caveat to that too, though. I think it's going to hit us the hardest as well.
It will.
If we are not prepared, because again, salt that has lost its savor is what trodden underfoot.
Right.
And so if we're not going to live up to that extra light and knowledge that we have been called, that we have received, that we are supposed to be able to administer, then it's going to be even worse for us than it's going to be the unbelieving Gentile. Some of which
Absolutely.
there might be good people who the Lord will miraculously preserve. I don't think He's going to miraculously preserve us if we don't live up to our priesthood and to our into the gospel that we have been given.
We've taken on a responsibility, and I feel like now more than ever before is the time that we need to walk up to those responsibilities. And I don't know how else to explain this other than we'll know who it is we're supposed to talk to in that time, right? We'll know who it is that is not beyond being touched by the Spirit. But we have to live in such a way now that, and it scares me because you're talking to a guy who, and this is the craziest part about me doing this podcast, I'm a very private person, right? I'm not someone that just likes to go out and put myself out there. And so it scares me because I might be the worst guy in this position, because just going up and telling someone you don't got to go down that path, there's a different way. But we got to be bolder than I think we've ever been before. I
agree. We need to be bolder, and I think there's going to be we're going to face trials. We're going to face specifically, I think we're going to face an Abrahamic test. I don't know that this is necessary for all generations, but for the kind of people that are going to actually establish Zion, they need to be a people that have been tried and tested. And I think that we're going to face a situation where, similar to maybe like a vaccine type situation, where we're going to be asked to comply and with something that we're going to know is wrong. We're going to know it's wrong, and it's going to look like there is no choice but to go along with that or be destroyed. That there's no way we're going to be able to take care of our family otherwise, or that there's going to look like there's no other way out. And we're going to be faced with this terrible, terrible challenge. But that's where we're going to have to be prepared and ready to stand for God and truth above all else. And we have to be willing to sacrifice everything else, including Well, I just shoot. Where's it? Lectures on Faith. I think it's what lecture is it? I think it's the sixth lecture where it's like in order for it's the lecture where it talks about like a religion that doesn't ask that doesn't sacrifice all things wouldn't have the power to save.
Right.
But in there, it talks about that, you got to be willing to lose all of this, your good name, your reputation, your wealth, your stature, your all of these wonderful things that we have in our lives, and even including up to our families and our own lives. And what it just comes to me, and I think it's tragic that we don't look at this as much as Mormons, but the cross is a very powerful symbol. And there's an admonition littered throughout the scriptures that we need to take up our crosses and follow him. Him being Christ. And what was that cross to Christ? It was everything. It was him submitting completely, fully, absolutely to the will of God in every little minute detail. So what is he asking of us when he asks us to take up our crosses and follow him is a question we need to really ponder and really be prepared to answer in the coming days.
Yeah, no, I agree. Where I find my hope at with this is that if there's one thing I've noticed throughout scripture, it seems to be that Heavenly Father loves a dramatic ending, right? He seems to
Yes.
be prone to that. You talked earlier about when we were talking about how did we get here, and you were like, I should have been bolder and those sorts of things.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that's true, Justin, because I think had we fired our musket too soon, so to speak, if we'd have fired our ammo too soon, we wouldn't be able to help now.
I agree with you on that. I guess it's not necessarily boldness, though. I was thinking more of just focus. I was not looking at it from a perspective of this is a spiritual war. I was looking at it from this is a political battle we're involved in here. This is an issue of education principles. This is a philosophical debate. And it's not. It's always been a spiritual battle. And that's something that I see now. And I think I would have approached problems, and our country as a whole could have approached things very differently from the very beginning. Like going back to Marx. If we had read Marx, and instead of just saying Marx is bad, said Marx is right, we've got a problem, let's repent and go back to Christ, though, because what he's proposing isn't the solution, but he's right, we've got a problem. With when Betty Friedan wrote the Feminine Mystique, if we didn't read that and say, oh, she's wrong, women shouldn't turn into those things, this feminism stuff's bad. If instead we said, you know what, you're right, there is something wrong, there is something that's not right in our homes, let's go to Christ and figure it out. We're not going to do what she suggests, because we know that's not the right thing, but we're going to go to Christ and we're going to find the real solutions. But instead we got polarized, like what you said, and it became, oh, they're the enemy, the communists are our enemy, the feminists are our enemy, the whateverists are the enemy, the liberals are the enemy, the conservatives are the enemy. Just take your pick. But we didn't, as a whole, look at it from a perspective of Christ and how Christ can save us from this problem. Instead, we came up with our own solutions, and our own solutions just played right into the devil's hands.
Yeah, no, I agree. I don't think there's necessarily a way out, right?
Yeah,
as you were saying, I think it's going to be a matter of taking our lumps, so to speak, here a little bit and be refined on the other side of this. I think in order to weather that storm, though, we have to do some spiritual preparation ourselves. We have to get ourselves in a position. I told my son this, who's not religious at all, my oldest son. He's spiritual in the sense he believes that God exists, but he just had a lot of bad experiences at church and it turned him off. He's about 24 now, I think 25, somewhere in there. But I told him, I said, look, you have to get so comfortable with the spirit that if everybody's going one direction, you have to be comfortable enough to know when he says go the other way that you're going to do it. I think we have to get to that level of spiritually prepared.
Yeah.
Where we are willing to live by those messages that are sent to us. Because if we don't, if we're not anchored, then we get tossed to and fro, right? We're susceptible to whatever pressures are put on us.
Well, what I think a substitute that I know I'm guilty of a lot, like especially at the beginning of COVID, right? You know, when Nancy Pelosi was saying that this is no big deal in Chinatown, I'm thinking, okay, this must be a huge deal. Why else would my enemy be saying otherwise? If she's going to take that stance, I need to take the other stance. And we're just seeing this kind of reactionism. And that scares me because it shows that we're not being present. We're not making decisions for ourselves. We're just reacting to stimuli in our environment. I see a lot of this with the Ukraine situation. Whereas personally, I mean, I don't see how this is justified. I knew a guy in Ukraine who, I don't know what happened to him. Don't know, but when Russia initially invaded, he sent photos and stuff, and he was telling me about what was going on. It was terrible. I don't believe that this invasion is justified. There might have been problems in Ukraine, but for Russia to invade a neighboring country with a military, to kill their sons and daughters serving in the military, and let alone potentially civilian, even if the Russians haven't killed a single civilian, they've at the very least killed a lot of sons.
Yeah,
who
absolutely.
are doing nothing but trying to defend their country.
Yep.
Whether misguided or not. And so you can't justify what's happened with Putin and Ukraine. At the same time, I see that there's a lot of stuff going on here. There seems to be a lot of conspiratorial stuff going on. And there might have been, I don't know that Ukraine's government is necessarily the good guy either in this story. But people seem to take this very strong reaction as if they only have two choices. I'm seeing people polarize. Some of the people we're pro-Ukraine. We're going to put Ukraine flags everywhere. And Russia's so bad. And that seems to have become the liberal narrative, right? And so in response, the conservative narrative has become, oh, Putin was totally justified. There's these terrible nationalist Nazis in that part of Ukraine, and they were doing terrible things to people in that part of Ukraine, and Putin's the hero here, and he's fighting against the globalists and this world, the Great Reset and the Klaus Schwabs, and I think the truth is a lot more nuanced, and I don't think really either of these people are necessarily our friends. I think there's other options than pick your side. In this battle, we've got to get to the point where we're mature enough to say, I'm not okay with maybe either of these. I want a third path, but to get there, we need the spirit, like you were saying. We have to have that communication to know when, because that's the thing, when all of the liberals go that way, all the conservatives go the other way, then pick your side. Are you liberal or conservative? Well, you're still going with the crowd, though. In that scenario, you're not going off by yourself. You're not standing alone. And I think, exactly like you were saying, the truth in these situations is going to lead to situations where we need to be prepared to not just react, but we need to make good decisions and be really present in our lives and aware of what's going on and exercise our agency and say, you know what? Yeah, I'm not okay with what Putin did. That's wrong. But also, I'm not going to go in with this other narrative that's pushing for this Great Reset either. I can choose that. I can say I don't like either of those.
You're 100% correct. And not only do we have to be comfortable enough to do that, I think all of us better get real comfortable with the idea of being a leader in those moments. Right?
Yeah.
Where not only do we not go those directions, right? Whether you go with Camp A or Camp B, but also you're a leader in the sense of you're going to show it by your actions and then be able to articulate why. Because let's face it, and again, this may be where folks who are trying to live the gospel in its fullest might be better equipped to do this than a lot of other folks, because it seems like we've been choosing the third way for quite a while, right? The either or, right? We didn't leave Mormonism, but yet we didn't go with the church.
Yeah.
Right? Typically, you see the two groups who either go towards John Dehlin or they go with the LDS church.
They double down on
right?
prophet.
There's a third way, which is, well, yeah, the church kind of fibbed to me. And does that mean that the whole gospel is false? No. Right? We've lived in that space. And yeah. I think as fundamentalists, we're uniquely equipped to be that third option where we can just maybe grab those who are awake and sensitive enough, who maybe need a little bit of helping hand till they get their feet under them, to say, don't go over that cliff. Don't go there. There's a different way. And I think we have to live by the Spirit enough to know what it is we're supposed to do, and then be comfortable with being sweetly bold, and at the same time, that leader that can take people with us. In some ways, Justin, and I know this sounds nuts, I'm almost looking forward to seeing what God has in store, because for so long I have looked for that person who was going to be the great leader, that was going to show us the way out.
Yes.
I've gotten to the point now where I'm like, I think there's hundreds, maybe thousands of them out there. Right.
I agree.
And I think we're going to start seeing them step to the forefront.
Yeah. I completely agree. That's exactly the understanding that I've received as well. As I sought for that leader, who's going to be the prophet that's going to show me how to navigate this. I finally realized it's what I believe, this culmination of the restoration. The restoration is not over. It is not finished. It was not completed. And it falls upon us, I believe, to complete it. And Joseph Smith had a vision of a nation of prophets. It wasn't a single man who's going to tell everybody what to do, but that every family, that every man, every woman had access and connection to God, and could receive inspiration and visions and be prepared to be leaders and that is what I think we have prophesied of as the 144,000 from the book of Revelation testifies to the servants that are called up to labor in the vineyard the last time in Jacob. It's all over. That's how beautiful are the feet of those. I slipped in my mind. I'm not have these memorized as well, but the scripture,
right,
of those who publish peace. And this is not just God's going to send us a savior this time. He's asking us to step up. He's asking us to participate. And yeah, as far as the hope goes, I'm not, as dark as things are, I do still feel a lot of peace, and that peace comes from faith. And a correct understanding of that it's okay. If my family makes it, it's okay. If my family doesn't make it temporally, that's okay.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, this life is just it's a blink. It's a blink of the eye. It's a flash, and it can be okay even if we don't make it. And the main thing is we can have that comforter with us. Even if we're in agony and pain, we can still have the peace of the comforter to preserve us and prevent our hearts from failing us. And I think that's actually another area where we are going to be uniquely equipped, is the gift of the Holy Ghost as a comforter in the times ahead. I mean, the scriptures talk about at times when men's hearts fail them. And the Book of Mormon talks about these people that would curse God and wish to die. There can be horrors upon this earth that I believe the gift of the Holy Ghost can shield us from. It can give us peace and comfort when all around us is horror and destruction and decay. And I think we're absolutely going to need that to endure as well. But because of that, we can endure with peace and confidence and hope. All is well, not because all is well, but because we are good with God, and we have submitted our will to Him, and we followed His plan, and whatever role we have to play in it, we're okay with that.
And I think it's that attitude that if we possess, and that knowledge, if that faith that we can turn into knowledge, right? That we can get to that point where we know that.
Yeah.
That I think really, really must scare the adversary to a certain extent, because then you can go at it with somewhat of a reckless abandon, right?
Yeah.
Consequences be damned. If this is the path I'm supposed to be on, if this is what the Lord wants me to do, I can go forward with full faith, knowledge, knowing that I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. And that's powerful.
Oh, yeah. Imagine a society of people living like that.
Exactly.
The devil would have no power over them. Neither would the world. And I believe that's the Zion that eventually will be established.
I agree with you 100%. So if we need to get to that point, we need to get our children to that point, so that when all this breaks, and it's about to break, like you and I were talking, the birth pangs are there. We are now moments from the event, so to speak.
There's no reprise. It's contraction after contraction. It's
right.
all one contraction.
Right. But that's the hope, right? And I guess that's where I think we really need to be at as we wrap up here, is that we've talked about some dark stuff, right? We've seen some dark stuff just this week. We know the problems are out there, but we don't have to be overcome by them. And you said something that I was going to talk about at some point here, and I'm glad you brought it up. And again, it's not because this podcast is special or anything like that, because I'm nobody's leader, I'm nobody's priest, I'm nobody's prophet, I'm none of that. But if you're listening to this, it's for a reason, right? Of all the podcasts you could be listening to, you're here. Why is that? Probably because you feel something.
Nothing special about us.
No.
No special expertise in this. No special positions of authority or power. We're just two guys.
Yeah, I've said I'm a clown with a microphone. I mean, literally, that's what you're getting. I've made no illusions that you're getting anything other than a clown with a microphone. But the stuff we talked about here tonight, if you're listening to this, driving home in your car, at the gym, at work, you're listening for a reason. Find out what your purpose is and then attack it with a ferocity, because it's going to be needed. If we just all stand where we're supposed to stand and then raise our hands when we're supposed to, we'll be right where we're supposed to be.
No, I agree. I love it. I think we all have a role to fill. And you know what? If you're not prepared, that's okay. There's still time to prepare, but eventually it's not going to be okay. So, and this is for myself more than maybe anybody else, but let's get our lives in order and let's get prepared. Let's be the people that we need to be to be kings and priests and queens and priestesses. We need to be prepared to to labor and serve, to gather Israel, to perform miracles. And, if we're not there yet, that's okay, but let's work on it. Let's get there. And let's realize too that we can do this together. There are no in the gospel, in Christ's church, there's no requirements. I'd say there's no requirements other than a willingness to serve. And if you're willing to serve, if you're willing to do what God would have you do, then you can become something. You can perform miracles. You can become a prophet. We are children of God. We have the divine potential within us, and we have generations after generation have fallen short of that. But this is it. It's a culmination happening here. And sorry. And so this is it. This is our opportunity to take the wisdom and the preparations that came before us from our ancestors, from other inspired people and families, and the people who have positively influenced us in our lives, and to take all of this and bring it to a head and truly live up to our divine potential. I think this is a glorious time. This is a time that all the prophets looked forward to. And I think that it's because with that darkness, there's going to be an equal and just as glorious amount of light at the end of that. And to be a part of this is humbling, to be honest. It is humbling. I don't feel worthy. I don't feel like I'm anybody special to be there. And if you're feeling that way too, then that's okay. I think that's okay. You still have a role to serve. Don't doubt your divine potential.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Justin, that's beautiful. I think on that we can wrap this episode up. Is there anything else you wanted to end with?
I think that's a good place to end.
I do too. All right, everybody. I appreciate you listening. This has taken on a life of its own, more than I ever dreamed it would. I can't tell you how much I appreciate everyone who listens. Got a YouTube channel. Go check that out now. It's just Mormon Renegade Podcast. That's the name of the YouTube channel. Check that out. We'll talk to everyone next time. Bye.